Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone, and I'm your host, Roger Stone. Well, former President Barack Hussein Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama have jumped into the Minnesota fray by issuing a joint statement Sunday condemning U.S. Border Patrol after an Antifa-affiliated activist was killed while allegedly reaching for his gun during an encounter with ICE officials, calling the incident a heartbreaking tragedy and accusing federal agents of acting with impunity. The statement was obviously written by the former divider-in-chief to distort the facts, undermine law enforcement, and recklessly inflame public tensions. The Obamas allege that federal immigration enforcement in Minnesota has become lawless and cruel, blaming so-called unprecedented tactics for the deaths of Alex Priddy and Renee Good. Barack Obama seems to forget that he holds the record for the largest number of illegals deported from the country, some 2.6 million illegals deported during his time as president. Of course, there were no violent protests over any of that. The former first couple has also expressed support for protests in Minneapolis, even as demonstrations have repeatedly turned more violent, resulting in property damage, assaults on officers, and widespread public disorder. It was revealed on Saturday by sources such as undercover reporter James O'Keefe with O'Keefe Media that communist cells are working with military precision, taking over streets and implementing mob rule through terror and coercion. Let's be very clear. These are not spontaneous or indigenous peaceful protests. This is a paramilitary type operation that is very carefully planned and obviously fully funded and staffed. More recently, Cam Higbee, a citizen journalist, has uncovered not one but two signal chats that involve the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota as well as Governor Tim Walz's chief political operative and campaign manager in orchestrating the attacks on ICE agents. The Obamas, of course, realize all of this. It's no coincidence that Black Lives Matter riots initially started while Obama was in office after the thug Trayvon Martin was killed while attacking a concerned citizen. Obama fanned those flames and let his surrogates do the dirty work. Now he's back at it again. The founder of ISIS, Barack Hussein Obama, hoping to finish off the country he infiltrated. And I honestly believe he hates with every fiber of his Marxist, Islamist, third world gutter trash being. Meanwhile, Governor Tim Walz has once again used his bully pulpit to worsen the situation happening under his watch, and yet again prove himself to be an absolute buffoon after invoking Nazi-era comparisons to attack federal immigration enforcement officers, suggesting that ICE operations in his state will someday be written about like the Diary of Anne Frank. Speaking at a press conference, Walz claimed that children in Minnesota are hiding in their houses afraid to go outside, and implied that President Donald Trump bears responsibility. Walz claimed that somebody is going to write that story about Minnesota, explicitly likening ICE informed officers to persecution under the Nazi regime. This is not the first time Walz has used such overheated rhetoric. Last year, he referred to ICE agents as the modern-day Gestapo, a remark widely condemned as dangerous and inflammatory, particularly as agents face rising assaults from activist mobs. Those warnings now appear to be prescient. I point out again that more than 70% of those who have so far been detained for deportation have criminal records either in their country of origin or here in this country. So the idea that U.S. citizens are being grabbed and kidnapped off the streets, arrested to be deported, is simply false. In recent weeks, ICE officers in Minneapolis have been harassed, beaten, and attacked. In one incident that the president highlighted, a Department of Homeland Security officer reportedly had part of his finger bitten off during an altercation with radical activists. Despite this violence, Walz continues to demand that President Trump pull all federal agents out of Minnesota, even though the Department of Homeland Security says the operations are focused primarily on legal immigrants, as I said it before, with criminal records. Walz's remarks also coincided with a viral online claim accusing ICE of using a 5-year-old child as bait. The Department of Homeland Security swiftly debunked the allegations as fake news, stating the child had been abandoned by his father and the alleged mother had refused custody. Officers ensured the child was fed, comforted, and placed safely. Walz's reckless comparisons trivialize the horrors of the Holocaust. They're a form of anti-Semitism. They demonize law enforcement, and they encourage hostility towards federal officers who are simply doing their jobs. Whether it is for this action against law enforcement now, or for allowing billions in Somali fraud to happen on his watch, it's time for Tampon Tim to be locked up. I think he should be charged. I think that there is more than sufficient evidence to do so. Of course, I'm not a lawyer. But today, I heard that he reached out to the president and that the president was sending Tom Homan to ascertain the situation in Minneapolis firsthand. Now, I know Tom Homan. He's a good friend of mine. He's a good man. But it sounds to me, and this is speculation, that the president wants a first-hand report. He announced Sunday that border czar Tom Homan was going to Minnesota following weeks of unrest from the coordinated paramilitary communist cells rising up against federal immigration enforcement. I guess I saw it in a Truth Social post on January 26th. The president said Homan would arrive Monday evening, that would be this evening, emphasizing that while Homan was not previously involved in Minnesota operations, he has long-standing relationships with state and federal officers there. President Trump wrote, "Tom is tough but fair and will report directly to me." White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that Homan's mission will extend beyond immigration enforcement. He will oversee ICE operations targeting illegal immigrants, particularly those with criminal records, and coordinate investigations into the massive, systematic welfare fraud emanating from the Somali migrant community, which has resulted now in billions of dollars of tax dollars being stolen through fraudulent entitlement schemes in Minnesota. This announcement comes amid heightened tensions in Minneapolis after a Border Patrol agent shot and killed the armed Antifa-aligned activist Alex Pretty after he violently resisted arrest during an encounter with multiple agents. The incident followed the earlier fatal shooting of U.S. citizen Renee Good during a separate enforcement action after Good attempted vehicular homicide against a federal agent. This is kind of like that movie Rashomon, very famous Japanese noir film in which various people see the exact same event, but everyone who's watching sees something different. I've studied the videos of both the Renee Good incident and now the Alex Pretty incident, and in both cases it's very clear to me that Good is clearly trying to run over an ICE agent, and it's very clear from the video I saw that Alex Pretty was reaching for his gun. Liberals continue to deny both. So what are you going to believe, your own eyes or the left-wing media? Democrats have responded by threatening a federal government shutdown unless Republicans strip funding from the Department of Homeland Security, which has been part and parcel of their Hegelian dialectic problem-reaction-solution model all along. President Trump has rejected calls to retreat, arguing the Minnesota operation is critical to restoring order and protecting the taxpayers. President Trump also revealed that Governor Tim Walz called, as I said earlier, requesting cooperation. So perhaps, let's hope, Trump is above all a negotiator and a businessman first, and if he can negotiate a peaceful settlement that carries out the rule of law, I think he will certainly do so. In the face, however, of what is clearly a very well-organized and funded insurrection, as I've said previously, and the president has said himself, he will consider implementing the Insurrection Act of 1807. Now, that is a huge step. It is the only waiver, the only instance in which the President of the United States is allowed to use uniformed military forces on American soil. And it has only been used in time of crisis. President Dwight Eisenhower used it in 1957 when local law enforcement in Arkansas refused to follow directives from the federal government regarding desegregation of the Little Rock schools. President Lyndon Johnson and John F. Kennedy both used it to enforce civil rights enforcement in the South during the 60s. George H.W. Bush used it in the wake of the Rodney King riots. It is a huge decision for the president. I have little doubt that Tom Homan will take care of business. He's certainly not the type to go soft when it comes to detaining and deporting illegals in enforcing the rule of law. But perhaps the president wants to hear the first-hand report from Homan before making this incredibly difficult decision. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors have issued 6 grand jury subpoenas last week to top Minnesota officials, including Governor Tim Walz, Attorney General Keith Ellison, and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey as part of an investigation into possible obstruction of federal deportation operations. While the subpoenas initially appeared focused on whether inflammatory public statements interfered with immigration enforcement, new reporting suggests the alleged obstruction may go far deeper. Citizen journalist Cam Higbee, who I referred to earlier, released what he describes as bombshell evidence after going undercover inside multiple left-wing activist signal groups operating across Minneapolis. Higbee says the groups exist for one purpose, to track, impede, and obstruct federal immigration agents in real time. According to Higbee, Minneapolis is divided into multiple patrol zones, each with its own individual signal group. Activists allegedly run mobile patrols to hunt for suspected federal vehicles, logging license plates into shared databases of known federal assets. Once identified, often incorrectly, vehicles are broadcast through an all-day dispatch call directing protesters on how to block or harass agents. Higbee reports that participants undergo training for specific roles. In fact, he has released their training manual. They use military-style salute reporting formats and tag operational updates with emojis to indicate assignments. He also released screen recordings showing an active federal vehicle plate database and dispatch calls tracking suspected ICE movements. Even more troubling, Inside Wire and other journalists who are citizens claim a former campaign strategist for Governor Walz, Amanda Kohler, was identified as a key leader within this signal network. Additional materials shared include, as I said, this activist training manual, organizational charts resembling a shadow police force, and coordinated pressure campaigns against individual journalists. Federal subpoenas are not enough, in my opinion. This communist thug operation needs to be broken up. Severe examples need to be made. This type of behavior cannot be allowed in the land of the free. Yes, I'm afraid Senator Joe McCarthy, who was vilified at the time, was right. And it turns out the only mistake was he didn't go far enough in calling out the communist infiltration within our government. But the real question that must be asked is, what did Governor Tim Walz know, and what did he know it? When did he know it? The famous phrase from Watergate. So what did he know not only about this violent insurgency in the streets of Minneapolis, but what does he know about the multi-million-dollar Somalian fraud on the American taxpayers? Those who have already thrown in the towel on the 2026 election make an enormous mistake if they don't think that this NGO nonprofit Somali fraud is not going to spill over into Michigan, Ohio, Oregon, Washington State, and as the president himself has said, both New York and California. But will Republicans stay the course? Do they have the guts to fight this out, or will they go soft? When we come back to the Stone Zone, I'll answer that question.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And you are now re-entering the Stone Zone. And I'm your host, Roger Stone. As I have said across the country in multiple speeches and interviews, the problem in America today is not the screwball socialist Marxist-inclined progressive Democrats. The real problem are the gutless, feckless, spineless, lily-livered establishment Republicans, the white wine-swilling, brie cheese-eating establishment Republicans who have neither the guts nor the courage to fight for America. Therefore, it's not surprising that a growing number of establishment Republicans are now calling for investigations into federal immigration enforcement in Minnesota, moves that would be tantamount to surrender in this ongoing war against the communist hordes. Following the fatal shooting of Antifa-aligned leftist Alex Pretty, who very clearly reached for his gun in a confrontation with ICE agents during an immigration operation in Minneapolis, several Republican lawmakers rushed to demand hearings and probes, echoing the talking points more commonly heard from Democrats and, of course, the fake news media. House Homeland Security Chairman Andrew Garbarino requested testimony from ICE and the CBP leadership, while Senators Tom Tillis, not running for re-election, Bill Cassidy, being challenged by President Trump, Susan Collins of Maine, and Lisa Murkowski, who was not really elected as a Republican, issued statements questioning federal tactics and warning against rushing to judgment. The irony is that these same Republicans have spent years arguing that law enforcement must be trusted to make split-second decisions, yet they now appear eager to second-guess agents in the field based on selective video clips and incomplete facts. These spineless Republicans are, very predictably, buckling under pressure. This is why the public demanded President Trump a man in action in the White House instead of one of these bozos. Trump administration officials have remained steadfast. The Department of Homeland Security has noted that Pretty approached officers while armed and resisted commands, forcing agents to respond defensively. Again, it's like that Japanese film Rashomon. I have watched it repeatedly, and he very clearly draws his gun. Anyone who's being objective can see it. President Trump has stood firmly behind law enforcement, placing blame squarely where it belongs on Minnesota's Democratic leadership and planned communist obstruction. Instead of backing that position, some Republicans, many facing re-elections or political pressure back home, have chosen to try to distance themselves. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, facing a Trump-backed challenger, warned that ICE's credibility is at stake. Governor Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma went further, questioning the very premise of federal enforcement in Minneapolis and suggesting Trump is receiving, quote-unquote, bad advice. This is a panicking-type behavior, as the president calls it, and it's most craven and cowardly. During a time when the left is unified in attacking border enforcement, Republican calls for investigations only embolden critics, undermine agents, and weaken President Trump's negotiating hand. Republicans, independents, all Americans must stand for law and order and be willing to see this thing through. The fate of our nation is at stake for generations to come, and we must succeed no matter the cost. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial or leave us online because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. I'm your host, Roger Stone. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, the Islamist Antifa sympathizer, was one of 17 Democrat state attorney generals to argue that there is no constitutional right to carry a firearm at political rallies or protests. Now he finds his own position under intense scrutiny following a fatal shooting at a crowded protest in Minneapolis as Democrats all of a sudden find renewed support for the Second Amendment, as long as they're communist thug foot soldiers occupying the streets who have the guns. In a January 26, 2024 filing supporting California's gun control laws, Ellison and other attorney generals backed sweeping sensitive place restrictions, explicitly including political rallies and protests as locations where the right to bear arms could be limited in the name of public safety. They wrote that without such bans, states would be unable to effectively prevent gun violence in crowded places, and that even the perceived risk of firearms could keep people away from public events. Now, fast forward to this weekend in Minneapolis, where a federal officer was shot and killed. He was an armed man violently resisting during an anti-ICE protest, an event occurring in a crowded public space. Although he did have a concealed carry permit, in Minnesota, you very specifically have to have ID on you while carrying. He didn't. That is in itself suspicious. Federal authorities have described the shots in that case as defensive, and the circumstances have ignited debate once again over Second Amendment rights at demonstrations. But what stands out to me is the contradiction from Democrats. Attorney General Ellison helped argue that politically charged political gatherings should be disarmed zones, yet now he and others are forced to defend a position that they vehemently opposed for years. How about we protect the Second Amendment rights of everyone, but understand when you are violently resisting law enforcement and most probably, as I saw in the video, reaching for your firearm, there's a good chance you might get shot. That seems like a pretty logical position to take considering the circumstances. Meanwhile, in a huge international scandal, China's senior military leadership is under new scrutiny as reports emerge that the Chinese Communist Party is investigating one of its top generals for allegedly leaking sensitive nuclear weapons information to the United States. Chinese Defense Minister confirmed Saturday that Zhang Youxia, 75, vice chairman of the powerful Central Military Commission of China and one of the highest ranking officers in the People's Liberation Army, is under investigation for serious violations of discipline and law. While Beijing offered no specifics, sources who attended a classified briefing told the Wall Street Journal that Zhang is accused of sharing technical details about Chinese nuclear weapons programs with federal officials in Washington, D.C. According to those sources, Zhang is also suspected of attempting to build his own power base inside China's Communist Party's military leadership, a move seen as threatening unity and loyalty to the supreme Chinese leader, Xi Jinping. Evidence reportedly included testimony from Gu Zhan, a former executive at China's National Nuclear Corporation, who himself is now also under investigation. The Chinese embassy in Washington framed this entire probe as part of the party's zero-tolerance anti-corruption campaign, a familiar line used by the authoritarian communists to justify sweeping purges in the past. Since taking power in 2012, Xi has punished more than 200,000 public officials, often under the banner of reform, while consolidating personal control over the military. Zhang is not alone. Another top military leader, General Li Zhuili, is also under investigation, and two former defense ministers were expelled last year. The Communist Party removed Zhang's fellow vice chairman, He Weidong, in October. The developments underscore deep instability within China's military command as the Trump administration goes on the offense against Beijing, rather than kowtowing to them like the Biden administration once did. A newly released National Defense Strategy memo identifies China as the primary strategic challenge to the United States, emphasizing deterrence over appeasement. The Chinese regime is so opaque, ruthless, and set for world domination, but they are internally fragile and hampered by their adherence to communist principles. The United States must use that against them and continue to exploit any fractures we find within their Politburo. The Chinese have discovered what other communist countries have learned. Communism does not work. They can call it communism as long as they want, but the Chinese are engaged in limited forms of capitalism to sustain their economy. There has long been instability between the political leadership and the military leadership, and there are serious questions about the military leadership's readiness for any kind of international engagement, never mind an attack on the United States. We'll be following the events in communist China very closely. Meanwhile, a viral AI-generated character known as Amelia a purple-haired British schoolgirl waving a Union Jack, has become an unlikely symbol of public resistance to the United Kingdom's increasingly draconian controls on free speech, and the broader Orwellian trend spreading across Europe. Amelia, created and endlessly remixed using mainstream AI tools, appears in multiple viral videos walking through London and Parliament, warning about mass migration, cultural erosion, and militant Islam. Predictably, establishment media and government-aligned disinformation monitors have rushed to label these videos as dangerous extremism as opposed to simply being free speech. But the explosion of Amelia posting tells a deeper story. You see, ordinary people are pushing back against a system that increasingly treats dissent in the UK as a crime. Ironically, the character originated in a UK Home Office-funded counter-extremism game tied to the notorious PREVENT program, which has issued criminal referrals to thousands of citizens, including children, for expressing politically incorrect views on social media. What was meant as behavioral control tools have now backfired spectacularly. The internet reclaimed Amelia as a symbol, transforming her into a decentralized protest meme against state censorship and ideological repression. This is precisely why elites are panicking at this point. Analysts complain of monetized hate, while government-linked organizations report being astonished by the speed and scale of this backlash. This means that the narrative control has failed. The meme escaped from its algorithm cage, and digital censors are powerless now to stop it. Across the UK and across Europe, citizens increasingly face arrests, investigations, and surveillance for speech that was once considered normal political debate, free speech. Amelia has risen as a digital middle finger to bureaucrats, NGOs, and to the police state services who believe they are the thought police. This is how free people will have to use AI to keep our freedoms against a ruling class that wants to put the boot to our necks in perpetuity. Meanwhile, Senator Ted Cruz is facing a huge backlash after leaked recordings revealed him sharply attacking President Trump's tariff policy and ridiculing Vice President J.D. Vance, all behind closed doors. Yet again, showing the duplicitous nature of the man once dubbed Lyin' Ted. Lyin' Ted. According to the recordings released by Axios, Cruz warned donors that President Trump's tariff policies could decimate the economy and even lead to impeachment, claiming that Trump lashed out angrily when confronted by Senate Republicans. In one account, Cruz said the president responded bluntly, "F you, Ted." Well stated, Mr. President. The remarks made in a donor meeting show Cruz is indeed positioning himself as a free trade, pro-intervention Republican ahead of the possible 2028 presidential run that I believe he has planned. He's now beginning to openly distance himself from President Trump's populist America First economic agenda and from Vice President J.D. Vance, who Cruz mocked as a creation of media personality Tucker Carlson. Cruz also derided Trump's Liberation Day branding for tariffs and complained about resistance inside the administration to trade deals with India, naming White House advisor Peter Navarro, Vance, and at times President Trump himself. Cruz accused Vance and Carlson of undermining hawkish national security officials and steering foreign policy away from confrontation with Iran, claims disputed in this case by both camps. Publicly, Senator Cruz's office insists he remains Trump's strongest ally in the Senate. Hogwash that is believed by virtually nobody in Washington. It's abundantly clear that Ted Cruz is what he has always been, a Bush Republican, a neocon war pig, perhaps orchestrating the release of this audio deliberately to show the Bush-era goons that he is their man. The public drubbing of Cruz by Tucker Carlson on his podcast last year should be listened to again by anybody with an open mind. It exposes Cruz as the fraud and lowlife I believe he is. He will be the worst enemy of MAGA in 2028 and others going forward. That's my prediction. President Trump, in the meantime, described some interesting details from his U.S. operation resulting in the arrest and capture of Venezuelan strongman Nicolas Maduro, saying American forces used what he calls a discombobulator to disable enemy systems. Speaking to the New York Post, President Trump said the weapon rendered opposing equipment inoperable, adding that details remain classified. President Trump may have been using shorthand to describe a combination of advanced U.S. capabilities already known to exist, including cyber warfare tools, acoustic system designed to disorient hostile forces, and possibly directed energy technologies such as the military's active denial system. These systems are designed to incapacitate without mass casualties, precisely the kind of overwhelming but measured force President Trump has long argued for. The operation has been widely reported to involve extensive suppression of Venezuelan radar, communications, and air defenses, clearing the way for U.S. helicopters and special forces on the ground. More than 150 aircraft reportedly launched from multiple bases, demonstrating unmatched American reach and coordination under the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. While fake news media try to make hay about whether a single weapon called a discombobulator actually exists, they ignore the larger and much more important point that the United States executed a complex, high-risk mission with both speed and precision, targeting a corrupt dictator who has long destabilized the region by importing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of illegal drugs into the United States. The message that has been sent is that American power is unmistakably back on the world stage, and President Trump knows exactly how to wield it. Once again, we saw in Venezuela the same measured projection of American power that we saw in Iran. Sure, the neocons were urging the president to put boots on the ground, to have a sustained presence in Iran. Instead, the president decided on a lightning strike by our superior military, disabling their nuclear weapons development program, but not losing a single American lives and leaving no Americans behind. This is very evocative of what happened in Venezuela. Was there regime change as we saw under the Bushes? No. There was the precision arrest of the drug importer-in-chief, the chief drug narco trafficker, Nicolas Maduro. And behind, we don't have a changed regime. We still have the same Marxist regime. Believe me, they're scared to death. Plus, I guarantee you there are nervous people in Cuba today, as well as Honduras. President Trump and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, have made it clear that they will enforce the Don Roe Doctrine, previously known as the Monroe Doctrine, which gives America the right to protect ourselves in our own hemisphere, and that brutal Marxist narco-terrorism regimes will not be tolerated. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Whatever you do, stay with us for a bit more politics, because we'll be right back on the other side.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. New investigative reports reveal what may be one of the most horrific mass killings of civilians in modern history. And the Islamist terrorist regime in Iran is responsible. According to multiple investigations published this week, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, ordered security forces to crush nationwide protests by any means necessary, unleashing a two-day slaughter that may have killed as many as 36,500 Iranians. The protests, sparked by economic collapse and repression, were met with extremely barbaric violence from the fledgling government. Witnesses and medical professionals described scenes of unspeakable brutality. Wounded protesters reportedly dragged from hospitals, stuffed alive into body bags, and executed in morgues. Doctors and nurses say patients were shot mid-treatment, some still attached to IV lines, oxygen tubes, and heart monitors. One nurse was warned of systematic execution, reportedly killed shortly after sending her message. Classified intelligence reviewed by international outlets indicate that Iran's Revolutionary Guard and Bazi forces were deployed across more than 400 cities, firing live ammunition into crowds after Khomeini authorized what one commander's called victory through terror. Communications were cut nationwide to hide the scale of the massacre. Internal regime tallies reportedly climbed from 12,000 deaths last week to more than 36,000 within weeks, numbers rivaling the deadliest atrocities of the 20th century. Yet Tehran continues to lie, publicly admitting to just over 3,000 deaths while continually blaming foreign enemies. The Iranian regime claims these people were killed by provocateurs from Israel. That's nonsense. This is not law enforcement. This is mass murder by a tyrannical regime that fears its own people. President Trump is right to call for new leadership in Iran. The free world must stop appeasing this regime, expose its crimes, and stand unequivocally for the Iranian people against Islamic terror. The time for the Ayatollah's reign of terror is about to end right about now. That does not mean, by the way, that I favor the return to a monarchy. To go from a theocracy back to the monarchy of the Shah, I believe would be a gigantic mistake. Instead, what we need to do is see free, fair, open elections in Iran and a democratic system built on the precepts of a solid constitution and the basic freedoms we enjoy here. It is hard to remember that even under the Shah, Iran was a relatively civilized and cosmopolitan society where women were allowed to be freely educated, students were allowed to study abroad. Of course, all of that disappeared due to the feckless weakness of the peanut farmer from Georgia, Jimmy Carter, who undercut the Shah and their alliance with the United States. President Richard Nixon at the time said that this very day would come precisely because of the weakness of the Carter administration. And now it appears that in Iran, the chickens have come home to roost. Every American should be praying for freedom and safety for the Iranian people. This level of brutality is unlike we have seen literally in centuries. And it is very clear that things are moving very swiftly to a head. I don't believe the president will send troops to Iran, nor do I think he will necessarily strike, but it's not clear that he needs to. This system is wobbling, it is unstable, and I salute the strength and the courage of the Iranian people. Under this kind of brutality, under this kind of regime, raising a hand in protest against this government is extraordinarily dangerous. It shows the American people how much the people of Iran desperately want freedom. I'm Roger Stone. You've been listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks, where 5 days a week we talk politics, news, history, style, and once in a while about food. Thanks for joining us, and until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.